Admiral Jake Morrison stood at the observation deck of the UES Liberty and watched the alien ships circle Earth like hungry wolves. His hands gripped the cold metal railing as another Zephyrian patrol cruiser passed by the orbital station. The blue lights from their scanning beams swept across the human vessels and reminded everyone who really held power in this sector of space. 200 years had passed since humanity signed the Galactic Concordat and gave up their right to build a real military. 200 years of living under the watchful eyes of species that called themselves protectors, but acted more like prison guards. Captain Lisa Harper walked up beside him and held a data tablet in her hands. Her expression told Morrison everything he needed to know before she even spoke. Another colony had been hit, and the response from their so-called protectors would come too late as always. She pulled up the report on her tablet and showed him the numbers. The mining settlement on Arcturus 7 had sent out distress calls for 3 hours before going silent. Pirates had raided the colony and taken everything of value, including 200 colonists who would likely be sold as slaves in some distant market. The Galactic Navy promised to investigate within the week. Morrison felt the familiar anger burning in his chest, but kept his face calm. He had learned long ago that showing emotion in front of the monitoring systems only brought more scrutiny from the Concordat. Every human ship carried AI watchers that reported directly to the galactic authorities. Every weapon system had limits programmed into its core. Every strategic decision passed through alien approval channels before implementation. Humanity had traded their teeth and claws for the promise of protection and discovered too late that protection meant control. Down on Luna Base, beneath the gray surface of Earth's moon, another human worked in, shadows that the Concordat knew nothing about. Dr. Alex Carter stood in a laboratory that officially did not exist and watched his life's work take shape before his eyes. The Prometheus Protocol had been in development for 30 years and involved the brightest minds humanity could secretly gather. The project existed in hidden facilities across human space and represented the true advancement of human technology. While the aliens thought they monitored every aspect of human military development, they had no idea what grew in the darkness beneath their notice. Alex looked at the prototype war machine suspended in the center of the lab. The quantum-enhanced AI core pulsed with soft light and processed information faster than any organic mind could comprehend. The weapon systems attached to its frame could punch through shields that the galaxy considered impenetrable. The engines could push speeds that violated what most species thought possible. This was just one piece of a much larger puzzle that would soon come together. His assistant, Karen Mitchell, walked over with a concerned look on her face. She had received word from one of their contacts in the outer colonies. The situation was getting worse and the timeline they had planned might need to move up. People were losing faith that change would ever come. The resistance networks that operated in secret across human worlds were growing restless. Karen worried that if they did not act soon, someone would make a mistake and expose everything they had built. Alex understood her concern but knew they had to be patient just a little longer. The pieces were almost in place. Ships were being built in hidden yards. Weapons were being positioned on worlds that seemed defenseless. Soldiers were being trained in facilities disguised as civilian operations. The greatest military force humanity had ever assembled was waiting in the shadows, and soon it would be time to step into the light. Out on the frontier world of New Texas, a colonist named Ben Rodriguez sat in the ruins of what used to be his family's mining operation. Korthak raiders had hit them during the night and killed everyone who resisted. His brother lay dead in the processing facility. His sister-in-law had been taken along with her children. The alien authorities had come 6 hours after the attack ended and promised to file reports and open investigations. Ben knew those promises meant nothing. He had heard the same words after raids on other settlements. Justice never came for humans who suffered at alien hands. He activated his communication device and sent a coded message through the underground network. The message was simple and direct. The time for waiting is over. Ben knew others across human space were sending similar messages. The patience that had held for 2 centuries was finally breaking. People were ready to fight even if it meant dying. They were tired of being victims in a galaxy that saw them as second-class citizens. The response came faster than Ben expected. Instructions arrived with coordinates and a timeline. He was to gather anyone willing to fight and prepare for activation. The resistance was moving, and soon the entire galaxy would know that humanity had been preparing for this moment. Ben felt something he had not felt in years. Hope mixed with fury and the certainty that change was finally coming. Back on Earth, President Maria Santos sat in her office and reviewed the latest intelligence reports. The massacre at Kepler Station had just occurred. 50,000 human civilians dead while their protectors responded to what they called a more urgent crisis. The images coming from the station showed horrors that would haunt humanity for generations. Captain Danny Walsh had managed to broadcast the carnage before dying from his wounds. His final message had been simple: show them what they do to us. Show the galaxy who the real monsters are. Maria knew this was the moment they had been waiting for. General Amy Foster had already contacted her through secure channels. The Human Liberation Front was ready to move. The Prometheus Protocol was ready for activation. Every piece of the plan they had carefully assembled over decades was in position. All they needed was her order. She stood and walked to the window of her office. Outside she could see the lights of the city, and beyond that the stars where human colonies struggled to survive. Maria thought about all the lives lost because humanity had trusted others to protect them. She thought about the future they could build if they took control of their own destiny. The decision was easy, even though the consequences would be severe. Maria returned to her desk and sent the authorization code that would change everything. Across human space, hidden facilities received the signal. Sleeper cells activated. War machines that had waited in darkness began to wake. The age of human submission was ending, and the galaxy had no idea what was about to be unleashed upon them. The images from Kepler Station spread across human space faster than any government could contain them. Captain Danny Walsh had made sure his final broadcast reached every human colony and settlement before he died. The footage showed Vorthan slavers moving through the station corridors and killing anyone who resisted. Children screamed for parents who would never answer. Families were torn apart as the raiders selected who would live as slaves and who would die. The Galactic Navy had promised protection, but their ships arrived 12 hours after the attack ended. 50,000 humans lay dead and another 10,000 had been taken into the nightmare of alien slavery. General Amy Foster watched the broadcast from her hidden command center deep beneath the surface of Mars. She had spent 20 years building the Human Liberation Front and preparing for the moment when humanity would finally say enough. The massacre at Kepler Station was the spark they needed. Public outrage was reaching levels that could not be ignored or suppressed. People across human space were demanding action, and the old government could no longer ask for patience. Amy sent activation codes to resistance cells on 40 different worlds. The plan they had rehearsed countless times was now in motion. Commander Rick Stone led his team through the maintenance tunnels beneath the Concordat monitoring station orbiting Mars. His squad of 12 moved in perfect silence using equipment that should not exist according to galactic law. The stealth suits they wore bent light around their bodies and made them nearly invisible. The weapons they carried could punch through alien armor like paper. Every piece of gear represented years of secret development and preparation. Rick had trained for this mission hundreds of times, but knowing this was real made his heart pound harder than any simulation ever had. They reached the main AI core chamber, and Rick signaled his team to take positions. The Concordat monitoring system controlled all surveillance over human military activities. Every ship movement and every weapon system and every strategic communication passed through this facility. Taking it down would blind the aliens to what humanity was about to do. Rick checked his chronometer and waited for the exact moment when other teams across human space would strike similar facilities. Timing was everything, and they had one chance to get this right. The signal came and Rick's team moved with practiced precision. Specialist Karen Hughes planted the quantum disruptor on the main core while others secured the entry points. The alien technicians working the night shift barely had time to register what was happening before they were subdued and restrained. The disruptor activated and sent electromagnetic pulses through the AI system that scrambled its programming beyond any hope of quick recovery. Within 60 seconds, the monitoring station went dark. For the first time in 200 years, the Concordat could not watch humanity's military movements. Similar operations were happening across human space in a coordinated strike that had taken decades to plan. Commander Lisa Park led the assault on the monitoring facility near Jupiter. Captain Greg Sanders disabled the surveillance network over the outer colonies. Major Kate Sullivan captured the central processing hub that coordinated all concordant oversight of human space. One by one, the eyes that had watched humanity for 2 centuries went blind. The chains that had held them were breaking. On Earth, President Maria Santos prepared to address not just humanity but the entire galaxy. The speech had been written and rewritten 100 times. Every word had been chosen carefully to convey strength without unnecessary aggression. She stood before the cameras knowing that what she said next would determine whether humanity faced the future united or divided. The weight of 200 years of submission and the hope of future generations rested on her shoulders. She took a deep breath and began to speak. Her words were broadcast across every human world and transmitted to the galactic communication networks. Maria spoke of the broken promises and the lives lost while the Concordat failed to protect those it claimed to serve. She listed the attacks that went unpunished and the injustices that were ignored. Then her voice grew stronger as she announced that humanity was withdrawing from the Galactic Concordat, effective immediately. She declared the activation of the Earth Defense Initiative and made clear that humanity would no longer depend on others for their security. The age of asking permission was over. The alien response came faster than most humans expected. The Zephyrian Empire had always been the primary enforcer of the Concordat's rules, and they saw humanity's declaration as an act of rebellion that could not be tolerated. Fleet Admiral Zaxthor of the Zephyrian 3rd Battle Group received orders to move toward Earth and restore order by any means necessary. He commanded 200 warships and had never lost a battle in his long career. The Admiral expected this operation to be finished within days. Humans had no real military and their primitive weapons could not stand against Zephyrian might. What Zaxthor did not know was that humanity had spent 2 centuries preparing for this exact moment. As his fleet moved through space toward human territory, the hidden shipyards of the Prometheus Protocol came online. Facilities that had been disguised as civilian operations or hidden in asteroid fields or buried beneath planetary surfaces suddenly revealed their true purpose. The lights came on in dozens of locations, and war machines that had been built in secret began to emerge from the shadows. Admiral Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the UES Retribution and felt the power of the ship thrumming beneath his feet. This was not the outdated defensive vessel he had commanded under Concordat restrictions. This was a true warship, built with technology that combined human innovation with reverse-engineered alien systems. The quantum drives could push the ship to speeds that would shock any alien captain. The weapons could fire with precision and power that exceeded anything the Zephyrians had faced before. Most importantly, the AI system that helped run the ship could learn and adapt in real time, making the vessel more effective with every engagement. Captain Tony Miller commanded the weapons station and ran final checks on systems that had never been tested in actual combat. The railguns were charged and ready. The missile tubes were loaded with warheads that carried enough destructive force to crack a small moon. The point defense network was online and ready to intercept incoming fire. Tony had spent 5 years training on these systems in secret, and now he would find out if all that preparation was enough. The Zephyrian fleet appeared on sensors, and Morrison ordered his ship forward. Other human vessels moved into position around him. The battle of the asteroid belt was about to begin, and the galaxy would learn that humanity had not spent 2 centuries sleeping. They had been planning and building and preparing for the day when they would take their fate into their own hands. Admiral Zaxthor was about to receive an education in what happens when you underestimate the most adaptable species in the galaxy. The first shot fired in humanity's war for freedom came from the UES Retribution, as it faced the Zephyrian Third Fleet near the asteroid belt. Captain Tony Miller pressed the firing control and watched as quantum-enhanced railgun rounds streaked across space faster than any conventional weapon could achieve. The rounds hit the lead Zephyrian cruiser before its shields could fully activate and punched through the hull like it was made of thin plastic. The alien ship broke apart in a brilliant explosion that lit up the darkness of space. Admiral Zaxthor watched in confusion as his flagship's sensors struggled to track the human vessel. The readings made no sense according to everything he knew about human technology. The ship moved too fast and its weapons hit too hard, and its defenses seemed to predict incoming fire before his gunners even launched it. He ordered his fleet to spread out and use their superior numbers to overwhelm the lone human ship. 200 Zephyrian warships against 1 human vessel should have been an easy victory. That confidence lasted exactly 3 more minutes. Captain Morrison smiled as his ship's AI began to fully demonstrate what human innovation could achieve. The system analyzed the Zephyrian attack patterns and adjusted defensive maneuvers in microseconds. Every shot his enemies fired seemed to miss by inches, while his own weapons found their targets with devastating accuracy. The quantum drives pushed his ship through space in ways that broke the traditional rules of engagement. He was not fighting like the aliens expected because humans had stopped playing by alien rules. More human ships emerged from hiding spots among the asteroids and joined the battle. The Zephyrians suddenly found themselves facing not one ship but 20, and every human vessel fought with the same impossible efficiency. Commander Lisa Park brought her destroyer alongside a Zephyrian battleship and unleashed a barrage that tore through its port side. Captain Greg Sanders used his frigate's speed to dart between enemy ships and disable their communication arrays. The coordinated assault looked like a dance that had been practiced 1,000 times, and the aliens had no answer for it. Admiral Zax Thor realized too late that he had led his fleet into a trap. These were not the primitive humans he had expected to face. These were warriors who had prepared for this fight with a level of dedication that terrified him. He tried to order a retreat, but found his command network compromised by human electronic warfare. His ships could not coordinate their movements or share tactical information. Each vessel fought alone while the humans moved as one unified force. The battle that was supposed to last days was over in less than an hour. The Zephyrian Third Fleet was destroyed, and the few survivors who managed to escape would carry stories of human fury back to their empire. The victory at the asteroid belt was just the beginning. Across human space, the hidden military infrastructure that had been built over decades came to life. Admiral Kate Johnson stood in the command center of the Armstrong shipyards on the far side of the moon and watched as the massive facility dropped its civilian disguise. The construction bays that had supposedly built cargo haulers and mining ships revealed their true purpose. Dreadnoughts the size of small cities began to move out of their berths. Carrier vessels loaded with fighter craft that could outfly anything the aliens possessed prepared for launch. Destroyer squadrons formed up in perfect formation as their crews ran final systems checks. Kate had overseen the construction of this fleet in absolute secrecy for 15 years. Every ship had been built with components manufactured in different locations and assembled here away from alien eyes. The vessels combined the best of human engineering with technology, reverse engineered from captured alien ships. But humanity had not just copied what others built. They had improved it and adapted it and pushed it beyond what the original designers thought possible. These ships represented what humans did best. They took existing ideas and made them better. On the planet New Texas, where Ben Rodriguez had lost his family to raiders, something else was happening. The civilian population was not just waiting for the military to protect them. They were joining the fight in their own way. Colonel Pete Adams arrived with transport ships full of equipment that colonists had been told did not exist. The Titan battlesuits were mechanized armor that turned ordinary humans into walking weapons platforms. Each suit stood 12 feet tall and carried enough firepower to level a building. The AI systems integrated into the armor, learned from the wearer, and adapted to their fighting style. A farmer could climb into one of these suits and within hours be as effective as a trained soldier. Ben was among the first volunteers to train on the new equipment. He climbed into a Titan suit and felt the neural interface connect with his thoughts. The armor responded to his intentions as smoothly as his own body. He could lift massive weights and run faster than any vehicle and target enemies with weapons that never seemed to miss. The suit's AI whispered suggestions in his ear about tactics and positioning, while leaving the final decisions to him. This was not just protection. This was power, and every colonist who had lost someone to alien raiders wanted a chance to use it. Dr. Sarah Brooks activated the Aegis defense network from her control station deep beneath the surface of Mars. The system had been disguised as civilian communications infrastructure for 50 years. Satellites that appeared to be weather monitors or navigation beacons suddenly reconfigured themselves into weapons platforms. Ground installations that looked like power stations deployed defensive turrets that could target ships in orbit. Planets that the aliens thought were defenseless suddenly bristled with enough firepower to hold off entire invasion fleets. The network linked everything together into a unified defense grid that covered all of human space. News of human victories began to spread beyond their own territory. Other species that had suffered under concordant rule watched with growing hope. The Talarian mining clan sent secret messages offering information about Zephyrian fleet movements. The Norvan Collective provided intelligence on Concordat supply lines. Even some individuals from species that officially supported the Concordat reached out to offer help. They saw in humanity's rebellion a chance for their own freedom. The galaxy had lived under the rule of the strong for so long that most species had forgotten they could fight back. Humanity was reminding them. Commander Rick Stone received reports from intelligence agents across alien space. The enemy was confused and frightened by what they were seeing. Humanity was not supposed to have this level of technology or organization or tactical skill. The Concordat had controlled human military development for 2 centuries and thought they knew exactly what humans were capable of. They had been wrong, and that mistake was costing them dearly. Rick smiled as he filed the reports. The galaxy was learning that underestimating humanity was a fatal error. They had 200 years to prepare, and now the results of that preparation were on full display for everyone to see. The Battle of Proxima Centauri would be remembered as the moment when the galaxy truly understood what humanity had become. 12 alien species had joined together to form an armada that was supposed to crush the human rebellion, once and for all. Over 3,000 warships gathered in the system, and their commanders were confident that sheer numbers would overwhelm any technological advantage the humans might possess. Admiral Jake Morrison looked at the sensor readings showing the massive enemy fleet, and knew this would be the test that determined humanity's future. If they won here, the galaxy would have no choice but to accept humanity as a major power. If they lost, everything they had fought for would be destroyed. Morrison had assembled humanity's main fleet for this confrontation. 500 ships of various classes formed up around his flagship, the UES Ascendant. The vessel was the newest and most advanced warship humanity had ever built, and it represented the absolute peak of what their technology could achieve. Every system on the ship had been designed to push beyond what the galaxy thought possible. The quantum drives could fold space in ways that seemed to violate physics. The weapons could fire with precision measured in fractions of millimeters across distances of thousands of kilometers. The defensive systems could predict incoming attacks and respond before organic minds even registered the threat. Captain Helen Clark commanded the stealth destroyer squadron that would strike first. Her 12 ships were equipped with cloaking technology that bent sensor waves around their hulls and made them nearly invisible to conventional detection. The squadron had positioned itself behind the enemy fleet days before the main forces arrived. Helen waited for Morrison's signal while her crew sat in absolute silence. Every unnecessary system was powered down to reduce their sensor signature. They were ghosts in the darkness waiting to become nightmares. The battle began when Morrison broadcast a message to the alien fleet. He offered them one chance to withdraw and avoid bloodshed. The response came from Admiral Krathos of the Vorthon Empire, who commanded the combined fleet. The alien admiral laughed at the human offer and promised that humanity would be brought back under control within hours. Those would be the last words Krathos ever spoke. Morrison gave the signal and Helen's stealth squadron dropped their cloaking and opened fire on the enemy command, ships from point-blank range. The alien fleet fell into chaos as their flagships exploded without warning. Commanders died before they could issue orders, and communication networks collapsed as relay ships were destroyed. Helen's squadron moved through the confused enemy formations like sharks through a school of fish. They fired and relocated and fired again, before the aliens could even identify where the attacks were coming from. The stealth technology kept them hidden long enough to do devastating damage before they finally disappeared back into the darkness. Commander Gary Wright led the main human battle line forward as the enemy fleet tried to reorganize. His dreadnoughts opened fire with weapons that made the void itself seem to burn. Quantum cannons tore through alien shields and armor with ease. Missile barrages saturated enemy point defenses and overwhelmed their ability to respond. Every shot from the human fleet seemed to find its target, while alien return fire was intercepted by defensive systems that worked with impossible efficiency. Wright watched his tactical display and saw the enemy formation starting to break apart under the sustained assault. The aliens had numbers, but humans had something more important. Every ship in Morrison's fleet was connected through a quantum communication network that allowed them to coordinate their actions with perfect timing. The AI systems on each vessel shared targeting data and tactical information in real time. Human ships did not fight as individuals. but as a single unified organism that could adapt and respond faster than any biological command structure. When one ship identified a weakness in an enemy vessel, every other ship in range knew about it instantly and adjusted their fire accordingly. Lieutenant Colonel Nina Foster led her ground assault forces to the surface of the Korthak homeworld, while the battle raged in orbit above. The Korthak had been some of the worst raiders of human colonies, and Nina intended to send a message that would echo across the galaxy. Her forces did not come to conquer or destroy. They came to demonstrate that humanity could strike anywhere at any time. The Titan battlesuits her soldiers wore made them nearly unstoppable, as they moved through Korthak military installations, with precision that terrified the enemy. Nina had studied the Korthak culture and psychology extensively. She knew that these raiders respected strength above all else and only understood force. Her troops disabled military targets while avoiding civilian casualties. They broadcast footage of their operations across Korthak communication networks, so everyone could see how easily human forces penetrated their defenses. The psychological impact was exactly what Nina wanted. The Korthak government surrendered within 6 hours and agreed to return every human they had taken as slaves. Other raider species watched and learned that attacking human settlements now carried consequences they could not afford. Back in orbit, the battle was reaching its conclusion. Dr. Alex Carter watched from his science vessel as the alien fleet tried one final desperate assault on the human lines. The enemy threw everything they had left into a concentrated attack on Morrison's flagship. Hundreds of ships focused their fire on the UES Ascendant, and for a moment it seemed like the sheer volume of firepower might overwhelm even the advanced human defenses. Then Carter gave the order to activate the weapon system his team had been developing in absolute secrecy. The Singularity cannons were the most advanced weapons humanity had ever created. Each cannon could generate a localized gravitational anomaly that acted like a miniature black hole. When Carter's science vessels fired the weapons, the center of the alien formation suddenly collapsed inward, as space itself seemed to fold around the designated target point. Dozens of enemy ships were caught in the gravitational field and crushed by forces that no shield or armor could resist. The remaining alien vessels that witnessed this demonstration of power lost all will to fight. They broke formation and scattered in every direction trying to escape. Admiral Morrison watched the enemy fleet flee and knew the galaxy would never see humanity the same way again. The species that had been controlled and limited for 2 centuries had proven they could defeat any force that challenged them. News of the battle would spread across every world, and every species would hear about what happened at Proxima Centauri. The age when others dictated terms to humanity was over. A new era had begun, and it belonged to those who had refused to accept chains. The Galactic Corps had never seen a fleet like the one that assembled there in the final days of the war. The Concordat ruling council called upon every species that owed them allegiance and demanded they send ships to defend the heart of galactic civilization. Over 10,000 warships from 40 different species gathered around the ancient space stations, where the council had ruled for millennia. The combined might of the galaxy's most powerful empires waited to face humanity in what everyone knew would be the final battle. If the humans won here, they would reshape the entire political structure of known space. If they lost, their rebellion would be crushed, and humanity would face punishment that would serve as a warning to any other species that dared challenge the established. Ordered Admiral Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the UES Ascendant and looked at the tactical display showing the massive enemy fleet. His own forces numbered only 800 ships, but every vessel represented the absolute best that human technology and training could produce. He had commanders who had proven themselves in dozens of battles. He had crews who worked together with the efficiency of a single organism. He had weapons and systems that had shocked every enemy they faced. Most importantly, he had something the aliens did not understand. Humanity fought not just for victory, but for the right to control their own destiny. That gave them an edge that numbers could not match. The Concordat Council sent one final message demanding humanity's surrender. They promised that if humans laid down their weapons and returned to their previous status, the punishment would be limited. They offered terms that sounded reasonable on the surface, but Morrison knew the truth. Accepting those terms meant accepting permanent subjugation. It meant admitting that humanity would always be less than other species. It meant betraying everyone who had fought and died to win freedom. Morrison's response was simple and direct. Humanity would never kneel again. The Battle of the Eternal Stars began with both fleets launching their opening salvos across the vast distance that separated them. The void filled with weapons fire as missiles and energy beams and kinetic rounds crossed the darkness. Captain Laura King commanded the AI drone swarms that humanity had deployed as their first wave. Thousands of small autonomous craft moved forward in patterns that seemed random, but were actually precisely calculated. Each drone carried enough explosives to cripple a frigate, and the swarms used their numbers to overwhelm enemy point defenses. The drones adapted their attack patterns in real time as they learned which approaches worked best against each type of enemy ship. The aliens found themselves fighting an enemy that seemed to predict their every move. Human AI systems had studied every recorded battle the concordant forces had ever fought. They knew the standard tactics and formations that different species preferred. They understood the cultural biases that influenced alien strategic thinking. When the Zephyrians tried their traditional encirclement maneuver, the human fleet was already repositioning to counter it. When the Vorthon heavy ships attempted to create a breakthrough point, the humans had concentrated their firepower exactly where it was needed to stop them. Every attempt the aliens made to use their numerical advantage was anticipated and neutralized. Colonel Jack Turner led his Marine forces in the most audacious operation of the entire war. His teams used boarding pods to assault the largest enemy command ships while the battle raged around them. The Marines wore advanced armor that protected them from the vacuum of space and carried weapons designed for close combat in confined environments. They moved through alien ships like ghosts and disabled critical systems before the defenders even realized they had been boarded. Turner's forces captured 3 enemy admirals in the first hour of combat, and the loss of their command structure sent shockwaves through the alien fleet. Dr. Alex Carter watched from his science vessel as the moment approached to unveil humanity's final surprise. The Harbinger Protocol had been his most controversial creation. The AI war machines he had designed were not just programmed to fight. They were designed to evolve during combat itself. Every enemy they destroyed taught them something new. Every tactic they witnessed was analyzed and incorporated into their strategic thinking. The machines became more efficient and more deadly with each passing moment of battle. Some human leaders had worried about creating something so adaptable, but Carter knew they needed every advantage they could get. When the Harbinger units entered the battle, the effect was immediate and terrifying. The AI war machines moved through enemy formations with a fluidity that seemed impossible. They dodged incoming fire with movements that suggested they could see seconds into the future. They targeted weak points in enemy ships with accuracy that exceeded what any organic gunner could achieve. Most disturbing to the aliens was that the machines seemed to learn from each other. When one Harbinger discovered an effective tactic against a certain type of ship, all the other units immediately knew about it and began using the same approach. The AI forces were not just fighting. They were teaching themselves to fight better in real time. The turning point came when the human fleet executed a maneuver that no one in the galaxy had ever seen before. Morrison ordered his ships to split into dozens of small groups that spread across the entire battle space. The aliens thought the humans were breaking formation and tried to exploit what they saw as a mistake. Instead, each human group began operating independently while staying connected through their quantum communication network. The effect was like fighting a single enemy that could be in hundreds of places at once. Every group supported every other group. When aliens concentrated on one human formation, the others would strike from unexpected angles. The coordination was so perfect that it seemed like magic. Admiral Caxanel commanded what remained of the Concordant fleet and watched in horror as his forces were systematically destroyed. He had fought in wars for 50 years and never seen anything like what the humans were doing. Every tactical doctrine he had learned was useless against an enemy that seemed to know what he would do before he did it. His ships were faster and better armored than he had been told was possible. His weapons were more powerful than any intelligence reports had suggested. Most frightening was that the humans kept getting better as the battle continued. They were learning and adapting faster than his organic crews could process information. The final phase of the battle lasted less than an hour. The Concordant fleet that had numbered over 10,000 ships was reduced to scattered survivors trying desperately to escape. The ancient space stations of the Galactic Core were surrounded by human forces, and the ruling council had no choice but to accept reality. They sent a message of unconditional surrender and begged for mercy that their own forces had rarely shown to others. Morrison accepted their surrender but made his terms clear. The Concordat as it existed was finished. The galaxy would be reorganized with humanity as the guarantor of peace and security for all species. 5 years after the war ended, Ambassador Rachel Green stood before the reformed Galactic Assembly and addressed representatives from every known species. She spoke of the new order that humanity had established. Former oppressor species had been forced to pay reparations and reform their governments. Worlds that had been enslaved were now free. Pirates and raiders who had once operated with impunity now faced swift justice from human peacekeeping forces. The galaxy was not perfect, but it was better than it had been. The war machines that had terrified the heavens now protected those who could not protect themselves. Jake Morrison retired from military service and spent his final years teaching at the new Strategic Academy on Earth. Students from dozens of species came to learn from the humans who had revolutionized warfare. They studied the tactics and technology that had won humanity's freedom. But the most important lesson Morrison taught was not about weapons or ships or battle plans. He taught them that the greatest strength any species could have was the refusal to accept chains. Humanity had proven that determination and ingenuity could overcome any obstacle. The galaxy had cried out in fear when humanity unchained its war machines, but from those cries had come a new age of justice and freedom for all.